Hi, hello, and welcome to this month's Aspen Avionics webinar. Presenting this webinar today is James Buck, Director of Flight Operations for Aspen Avionics. A little bit about James. James is a retired Marine Corps aviator serving 25 years of active duty. He has served 3 deployments to the Persian Gulf and Iraq, flying CH-53E helicopters off the USS Caraway and the USS Boxer. He is also an accomplished flight instructor training new Marine Corps, Navy, Coast Guard, as well as international students in the T-34C and the King Air 200 at Naval Air Station Corpus Christi in Texas. Additionally, he served 4 years as a post-depot maintenance test pilot for the T-34C, King Air 90, and the King Air 200. For the past 10 years, he has logged over 2,200 hours flight testing all Aspen Avionics products as a chief test pilot and is one of 2 staff test pilots. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Please use the Q&A icon in your Zoom client to submit questions. Please do not use the chat feature. We'll be answering questions live throughout the webinar thanks to Michael Studley, who is our Director of Field Service Engineering and our Northeast Midwest Regional Sales Manager. We will also record this webinar and will send a link to all registered attendees no later than tomorrow afternoon. It will also be available on Aspen's Evolution Video Library, which is located on our website on the Aspen Avionics homepage. James, it's all you.
Well, thanks, Barry. I appreciate that introduction. Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon from southern Colorado, where I'm located. What we'll talk about today, we'll start off with a brief Aspen system overview, talking about our current product line. We'll go over some cool features that you may or may not already know about. We'll also go over a couple tips. Now, the cool features and tips are things we've gleaned from the last several shows we've done. These are common questions we get. I'll go over a broad-based picture of all the compatible autopilots with the Aspen systems. We'll, of course, talk about our current promotions. At the end, we'll wrap up with the Q&A session. Now, as Perry said, use the Q&A now to type in your questions, and Mike Studley will take care and answer those. At the end, we'll cover any questions that Mike didn't get to, or go over some common questions that he saw in the Q&A section. However, before I get started, I want to go back to this opening slide that some of you may or may not have seen, depending when you logged in. And this slide is very important because this really speaks to what Aspen is all about. And I know you're thinking I'm talking about this awesome 2500 Max system, but not at all. I'm talking about this center stack down here. Starting with the top here is an NGT 9000 ADS-B transponder. In my opinion, by far the best ADS-B transponder out there because it does everything, plus it's a multifunction display. But that doesn't really matter. This could be a Skytrax unit from Avionics. This could be a Garmin GTX 345. This could be an older analog transponder tied to a GDL88 or a free flight box. It doesn't really matter to us. As a display manufacturer, we're going to work really hard to integrate all this ADS-B information to our displays. Below that is a PSC Engineering PMA 450 audio panel. Awesome audio panel that intelligent audio. But again, it could be an Avionics audio panel, it could be a Garmin audio panel, it could be another manufacturer. Doesn't really matter to us. We're going to integrate all the new features, the audio calls and stuff like that of our Max units with whatever audio panel you have. Below that are a pair of GTN 650s. Now this aircraft started its life with a pair of non-WAS 430s. They were upgraded 430Ws. I was actually going to put IFT 440s in here until I got a really great deal from an operator that did not like the touchscreens of the GTNs and wanted his 430Ws. So once again, it doesn't really matter. 430, 530, 430W, 530W, GTN 650, GTN 750, the newer, smaller, compact Garmin GPS units, the Avionics IFT 440, 540, 550, even the older analog GPS, IFR capable GPS units are going to integrate perfectly well with your Aspen systems. Below that, right out of view, is the awesome Avionics DFC-90 digital autopilot, which I do believe was the first digital autopilot available for general aviation aircraft. Excellent. However, this aircraft started with a 55X. That being said, STEC 30 all the way to the 3100 will work with the Aspen systems. Older King autopilots, Century autopilots, Cessna autopilots will work with the Aspen system. The new GFC 600 from Garmin works with the Aspen system. So once again, it's all about integration for us. So if you remember nothing else over this next 60 minutes or so, Remember the word integration, because as a display manufacturer, we work really hard to make sure whatever you have now or whatever you want in the future is going to work very well in our system with our displays. And remember, this is your aircraft, you're the PIC, and you don't lose PIC authority when you're at the avionics shop. So make sure you tell them what you want, and you guide the path where you want to go with your system. Okay, so let's jump right in. We'll start off with our flagship system, the Evolution Pro Max PFD. Now, the Pro system has been around for over 10 years now. And what we've been doing in the past, we've been doing software upgrades to add new features and options to our display systems. Well, a few years back, we got to the point where that hardware would no longer support it. So we had to come up with a whole new hardware, hardware refresh in our system. So while maintaining the same form factor, we've added a new piece of glass, which is a much better anti-glare capability. We've got a new graphics card. And for reference, the original graphics card had 16 color combinations. The new graphics card has over 16 million color combinations. So stuff like synthetic vision or navmap looks so much better now. We also have a new processor that's 4 times as fast as the original processor. And what that does for you, when you've got synthetic vision in traffic, or you've got synthetic vision in weather, and you're loading this display with all sorts of information, this new processor makes sure everything when you're doing dynamic maneuvering runs nice and smooth. We also have new AHRS and ADC sensors. These sensors are much thinner now, and they run a lot cooler than the previous systems. So what all this equates to is more processing power for Aspen to move forward with future features and options as we go along. Kind of already touched base on the visual feature enhancements, but if you ever go to one of our bigger shows like Oshkosh or Sun and Fun, we've got this really, really good demo system showing a legacy PFD running alongside a Pro Max PFD. And you can really see the difference. Now, the legacy displays are nice displays, but they just cannot compete with all this new hardware in the Pro Max system. Because it's the same form factor, we want to take care of our original customers. This is plug and play, so we use the same harness. There is, since the Maxes have audio, there is one wire that has to be run from the existing connector to the audio panel. But other than that, this is really plug and play. All your configurations, any unlocks you purchased before, like ADSB or angle of attack, synthetic vision, those are going to just transfer over to the new display. So you don't have to recalibrate, repurchase anything. So it's a really, really great way to upgrade your panel. It is compatible with both the 3100 and the GFC 600, which we'll talk about more later. And these two items are red are very important because these go hand in hand. The new backup battery technology with increased capacity and this new thing called dual-aided AHRS are what allows Aspen, a single Aspen PFD to be displayed without a backup attitude indicator. You do need your airspeed indicator, altimeter, and turn coordinator, but you can remove, in most cases, your vacuum driven attitude indicator from now on. Next up from there is our 2000 2500 Max systems. So a 2000 system, this is basically a PFD 1000 paired with an MFD 1000. The great thing about the MFD 1000 is it has its own AHRS, all the same things, hardware as a PFD does. So it acts primarily as a multifunction display, where you basically press this red button right here, red button, it'll turn into a PFD if you ever have a problem with your main PFD. So this system with the dual-aided AHRS and new backup battery, the FAA now has authorized the MFD 1000 to be a complete legal backup to the PFD 1000. So you can install just these two displays and remove your entire 6-pack. And I've got a picture of a panel here later in the presentation as well. We also have a 1500 Max. Now the 1500 Max is a PFD 1000 paired to an MFD 500. The big difference between the 500 and the 1000 MFDs is the 500 does not have its own AHRS, so it can't be a backup display. So if you want to remove everything, you have to do a minimum of a 2000 system. Our base model, our entry-level model is the Evolution E5. This is actually the 5th year anniversary of the E5. It's been out for quite a while now. And actually, the E5 is where we introduced all that new hardware, the Pro Max. So we introduced that in the E5 about a year or two before we released the Pro Max. And so like the Pro Max, you install an E5, you don't need a backup attitude indicator. Once again, you need your airspeed altimeter and your turn coordinator, but you do not need a backup attitude indicator in most cases with the E5. The E5 is fully IFR certified as long as you pair it with an IFR-capable panel-mounted GPS system, like a 430. It doesn't have to be lost. A 430 is IFR certified. Any IFR-certified panel-mounted GPS will work with this. And you can fly ILSs, LPVs all day long. Really, really nice system. Like our Legacy and Pro Max systems, it is compatible with Legacy Avionics. If you have an older King or Century autopilot, or even a Cessna autopilot for that matter, but primarily I want to talk about the King and Centuries, you can also drive those autopilots with this E5. There are a couple extra boxes you need, and this actually is the same for the Pro Max as well if you're going to a King or Century autopilot. You need an ACU. What the ACU does, it converts the analog navigation and heading information from the Aspen, or to digital heading navigation information from the Aspen, changes it to analog so your autopilot can understand it. What the EA100 does, it changes the digital attitude information of the Aspen display to analog so your autopilot can understand it. So, so there will be some additional boxes if you have these older autopilots, but it does work really, really well. E5 does now also have the capability to send selected altitude for altitude pre-select, indicated airspeed for the Trio, the Bendix King, or the True Track autopilots as well. And as I mentioned, since this shares the same hardware as the Pro Max, this is fully upgradable to a 1000 Pro Max just via software. So, for instance, say you want to get a Pro Max installed, but the price is cross prohibitive with the cost of the installation. Well, you can save half the display cost, install an E5 now, then a couple years down the road when you want to upgrade, you literally just pay the price difference. So, for instance, if you bought the E5 at $5,000 and your Pro Max is $10,000, you just pay the price difference and we make that a Pro Max for you. So we don't gouge and try and charge you twice for something. But this is a really great way to start building your panel. So what are the differences between the E5 and the Pro Max? Well, for starters, the E5 cannot display synthetic vision, where it's a standard feature on the Pro Max. The E5 cannot display angle attack, which is an optional feature on the Pro Max. The E5 cannot display 80-speed traffic and weather, which are optional features on the Pro Max. The E5 cannot have flight director. And we'll talk about that little caveat about the flight director on E5 later in the presentation. And the E5 does not have bearing pointers. So those are some of the key features between the E5 and the Pro Max. Now, this particular picture is shown with the optional advanced feature unlock. So for additional $500, you'll get true airspeed, outside air temperature, winds aloft, or your actual winds are, and you also get the lost GPS annunciations. Now, this information is a standard feature on the Pro Max. So if you're buying the E5 this year with a full intent of upgrading to a Pro Max next year, then I know sales guys are going to hate me for this, but don't buy this yet because it's a standard feature. But if the E5 is going to be your end-all, be-all, not to get it up, well, this is really nice information to have. Okay, on to some cool features. The first one I want to talk about is the emergency RSM GPS, and this has been around Aspen since the beginning. It is available with the Pro to Pro Max only, so this feature is not in the E5 system. And what it does, it automatically, the emergency RSM GPS automatically activates when the unit system identifies a loss of GPS. So here you are on your panel, you've got these amber GPS 1, 2. That means you've lost GPS signal. It could be the GPS unit's failed. You could be having electrical failure. Remember, your 10-mile GPSs don't have backup batteries. So if you lose electrical power, you'll probably lose the GPS systems. Once it recognizes that, it goes into emergency RSM GPS reversion, emergency use only. So you'll get those on each one of your displays. Now, what that does is it retains, so it's now providing GPS function, but the Aspen systems are going to retain all the waypoints that were in your panel-mounted GPS before it failed. So notice here, it will show up on all three displays, or how many displays you have. Notice here, I had a flight plan here from Double Eagle to AWASH up to Santa Fe. Yeah, I took this picture on the ground, so if I was flying, this line here would have been magenta, was my first leg, but it's going to turn to white, so everything's going to be white on this route. Now, you can't change waypoints, so it is what it is. Whatever you had activated, that's what you have. So because there's no way to enter points. And you can't shoot an approach either, because we remove, since the emergency GPS is not to the same standard as a panel-mounted GPS, we remove these deviation indications. But you can still fly generally when you fly to PEC.